Ouch! That slap caught me off guard, knocking me backward with my ears ringing. What was that for? I yelled. But let's rewind a bit to a few weeks ago to fill in some blanks. I came home from work around 4, like usual. Since my company deals with UK clients, I start early to sync up with their time zone. It took some adjusting, but I've grown to like it. Walking into the kitchen, I checked the bulletin board, finding only one note. Working late again? Guess it's another solo dinner. Back when Anne and I were newlyweds in our little apartment, we used a chalkboard to coordinate schedules. Even after we moved to a house, we kept up the tradition. At first, we'd leave cheesy love notes. I'd write stuff like, "Can't wait to see you, Cookie," a nickname from our early days. She'd reply, "Miss you too, but no more Cookie." I get it, it sounds sappy, but those notes meant something, especially now that things between us seem stale. These days, it's just quick notes about her plans. Today's was simple. Working late. I get it. Routine can dull even the brightest sparks. Lately, it's felt like more than just routine affecting us. We hardly spend any time together anymore. My work hours are part of it. I'm out before she's even up. But Anne's job as a realtor makes it worse. Her schedule revolves around clients, leaving us little time to connect. Need to make an offer on a house late at night? Anne's there for the paperwork. Selling your home? Anne's got the open house covered for Saturday or Sunday. Simple as that. But wait, there's more. 2 years ago, Anne decided she wanted to run for city council. I'd tried to dissuade her, but everyone encouraged her. I wasn't worried initially because our council member was popular, but halfway through his re-election campaign, he dropped out due to his wife's illness, and Anne took his place. Suddenly, she had a ton of new responsibilities. It wasn't just the meetings. Anne was busy with constituents, task forces, you name it. I was proud of her on election night, but as time passed, we grew apart. Whenever I brought it up, she accused me of jealousy, and it got worse. Her attitude toward me changed, becoming colder and condescending. I couldn't shake the feeling. It ate at me, especially seeing how little time we had together. One night, as we were about to relax, she got a call from a client, ruining our moment. It still bothers me to this day. Honestly, I remember having to scrap our weekend plans once due to a major client's network issue. Now I'm at the kitchen table, trying to sort things out. Maybe I've been unfair to Anne. Perhaps jealousy plays a part because everyone seems to demand her time. As a network engineer, I've learned to spot problems from small signs. My gut says it's more than just our hectic schedules bothering me. It's her attitude towards me. When she first joined the council, she'd excitedly share updates. Now, she's silent. Maybe it's just the excitement wearing off. Or maybe she thinks I'm not worth talking to anymore. It's a troubling thought. What if she's cheating? I quickly pushed that awful idea away. But it fits too well with my doubts. Why the secrecy about her late nights? Could she be seeing someone else? Why the condescension when we're together? Does she resent me as her unwilling partner? Angry thoughts consume me. I need to break this cycle. So I change into work clothes and mow the lawn until it's dark. It helps clear my head. I still worry, but at least I'm calm enough to make a plan. When network issues arise, I run tests to find the cause. I need to do the same for my marriage, figure out what's gone wrong. Over dinner, I brainstormed diagnostic tools. Spying crossed my mind, but it seemed complicated. Setting up cameras or bugs seemed pointless with Anne rarely home. Her time away concerned me. Tracking her car felt futile too, given her constant travel for work. I hesitated to tap her phones, deeming it costly, but hiring a pro seemed the best bet. Searching online yielded many options, but I distrusted reviews. I stumbled upon a news story featuring local detective agencies, Channel 9, where Amy Howard works. We dated briefly in college, so I figured she might help. I phoned Amy, suggesting we grab a beer after work. She agreed, noting it was a slow news day. When she arrived, I admired her confident, professional demeanor. We caught up on post-college life before I broached the topic of her recent article on detective agencies. Amy caught on, realizing I hadn't mentioned Anne. She gave advice on choosing an agency, cautioning against large firms due to gossip risk and small ones for potential delays. She recommended Masterson Agency, known for professionalism and results. I thanked her, and as I left, she squeezed my hand, wishing me well. Driving home, I pondered our talk. I hoped Amy would keep my issues confidential. The next day, I contacted Masterson Agency based on her recommendation. Luckily, the woman I spoke to arranged for me to meet with Mr. Masterson the next morning. I assured her I'd be there. That evening, Anne arrived home on time, and we had dinner together for the first time in days. I was nervous about conversing with her given my plans, but she spent the evening venting about a rival businessman, leaving me little to say. The next morning I rose early and skipped breakfast to ensure punctuality. Leaving a note for Anne, I drove downtown, surprisingly encountering light traffic. The Masterson agency was conveniently close to my favorite coffee shop, Stranger Brew. It was bustling even at that hour, with me snagging an empty seat. As I enjoyed my coffee and sandwich, a disturbance erupted nearby, a red-faced man berating a young woman. "You're still here? What gives you the right to hog a table when others need it?" The young woman sat silent, clearly shocked by the man's sudden outburst, which only seemed to anger him more. "You're Mexican, aren't you? I bet you're an illegal immigrant. First, you steal our jobs, now you're taking up space in my cafe. Go back to where you came from." He reached out, spilling coffee as he slid his hand across the table. Before I knew it, I was standing between them. "Leave her alone. She was here first and deserves this table. You owe her an apology." The man grew redder, but before he could retaliate, the cafe owner intervened, brandishing a pool cue. "Get out and don't come back. You're not welcome here." The man left, muttering insults. Turning to the woman, I apologized and offered to buy her another coffee. She was surprised by my intervention. "You don't know me. Why did you help?" I shrugged. "I can't stand bullies and bigots." She smiled gratefully, introducing herself as Maria Elena Alvarez. "I'm grateful for your help. Not many would do what you did." "Thank you, Maria Elena. I'm David Davis. Glad I could help," I replied. Joe returned with fresh coffee for both of us, apologizing for the incident. We assured him we'd return. Maria then suggested we share a table to free up space. "I'd love to join you," I accepted, sitting down beside her. We chatted over steaming cups. Maria explained she was early for her new job nearby. I admitted I didn't frequent the cafe often, having a meeting later. As Maria checked her watch, she thanked me again and prepared to leave. I shook her hand, watching her go. Finishing my coffee, I left for the Masterson agency. Spotting Maria ahead, I caught up at a crossing. She smiled as we walked and, noticing me following, nodded in acknowledgement. She frowned, worried I was following her. To my horror, she entered the same building I was headed for. I waited, hoping she'd leave, but she remained in the lobby. Approaching cautiously, she expressed gratitude for my actions at the cafe, but warned against following her. "I have an appointment here," I assured her. Skeptical, she headed to the elevator, and I followed. She went to the 4th floor, and I explained helplessly that I had business there too. As she entered the Masterson agency, her expression softened. She wished me luck, and I reciprocated. Entering the agency, I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew my purpose. Despite not being immediately ushered into Bradley Masterson's office, I found reassurance in having a senior specialist. He looked the part, towering over me like a midfielder. I felt intimidated at first, but he swiftly eased my nerves with his professionalism. He adeptly questioned me about my wife, my suspicions, her habits, and other relevant factors. He's clearly very knowledgeable. After we talked for about half an hour, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Your wife being on the council makes our job easier. She's used to being in the public eye, so surveillance shouldn't be a problem." His words set off alarm bells in my head. "Your team needs to be careful," I warned. "If she catches wind that she's being followed, it could lead to a major political scandal." "Mr. Davis, rest assured," he replied. "We pride ourselves on discretion and professionalism. Your wife won't suspect a thing." Still uncertain, I pressed, "What methods will you use? Audio, video, GPS tracking?" He leaned forward, arms crossed, and gave me a stern look. "I won't disclose our methods to prevent you from looking for signs of surveillance. We've had clients jeopardize our work by accidentally tipping off their spouses." He then made it clear. "For the next 2 weeks, do not attempt any surveillance yourself. Stick to your routine and act normal around your wife. We're professionals and don't need interference from amateurs, understand?" I nodded, but his last statement lingered in my mind. "You mentioned 2 weeks. Do you think that's enough time to gather what you need?" He relaxed and smiled. "Considering you've noticed significant changes in your wife's behavior over the past 6 months, it suggests the affair, if any, is at its peak. She's eager to see the other person and believes she's getting away with it. I anticipate having definitive answers by next Friday. At the very least, we'll flag any suspicious behavior warranting further investigation." Impressed, I realized he not only possessed the skills for the job, but also a keen understanding of human nature. I had chosen the right investigator. "Okay, I'm sold. How much will this cost?" Without hesitation, he named a figure that made me wince. I understand it seems steep, he said calmly, but we'll deploy multiple staff, vehicles, and costly equipment. And most importantly, we'll provide answers. You've expressed how uncertainty weighs on you. What's your peace of mind worth? He had a point. I wrote the check. Over the next 2 weeks, I felt uneasy. I questioned my every move around Anne, fearing suspicion, but it became clear it didn't matter how I acted. Anne's indifference persisted. When I inquired about her job, she responded as if it were a favor. It became clear she doubted my ability to comprehend her work on the board, making me feel like more of an annoyance than a husband. The following weekend, I tried to engage her by suggesting we go out, but she dismissed the idea, citing exhaustion from open houses. It felt like we were mere neighbors, not spouses sharing a home. Memories haunted me of our once vibrant life together. We shared common interests, dreams, and a deep passion for each other. But as we pursued our ambitions, our connection faded. I pondered if my career focus had contributed to our distance, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play. Reflecting on Anne's relentless pursuit of success, I questioned her satisfaction with what she had achieved. I realized our career paths had strained our marriage. Despite my discomfort, I believed spying on Anne was necessary for peace of mind. During those 2 weeks, I felt like a patient awaiting exploratory surgery, terrified of what would be uncovered, but eager for it to end. Before the meeting, I stopped by Stranger Brew for my usual coffee, feeling like it was my last meal. Despite scanning the cafe for Maria Elena and the bigot I encountered previously, neither appeared. Finally, it was time. Walking to Masterson's agency felt like the Green Mile for a condemned man. Masterson surprised me by escorting me to his office himself, his demeanor grave. This can't be good news, I thought. Sitting down, he gestured to a folder on his desk. I think you should see for yourself, he said quietly, causing my heart to race. With trembling hands, I opened the folder and examined the first photo. A picture of my wife holding open the door to an unfamiliar house, a for sale sign barely visible. Flipping through more photos, I saw Anne at the council chamber, chatting with the mayor and entering her real estate agency. Confused, I realized they all appeared innocuous, exactly as I'd expected my wife to look. Masterson's somber expression morphed into a wide grin as he spoke. Mr. Davis, I'm pleased to inform you that your wife hasn't been unfaithful. She hasn't shown any signs of suspicious behavior whatsoever. He reclined in his chair, exuding relaxation. Your wife wears many hats, Mr. Davis. She's a dedicated official, a successful realtor, and a driven individual. But rest assured, she's not a disloyal spouse. His tone turned serious. I understand these past 2 weeks may have been tough for you, but you can put your doubts to rest now and focus on your marriage. He smiled warmly. Usually my job involves delivering bad news. It's refreshing to share good news for a change. He rose to shake my hand. You're fortunate, Mr. Davis. I felt elated, as if a doctor had just declared a suspicious spot on an X-ray benign. Struggling to express my gratitude, I shook his hand again. He handed me an envelope from his desk drawer. Here's the remainder of the bill. I hope you feel it was money well spent. You can settle it with the receptionist on your way out to spare the hassle of sending it home. He chuckled. I won't resort to cliches about walking on air. Suffice it to say, I left Masterson's office in high spirits. Initially, relief washed over me, but soon a realization dawned. I needed to start repairing my marriage right away. I had to demonstrate my love for Anne and stop taking her for granted. By the time I returned to work, I had a plan in mind. Luckily, Anne had a free weekend ahead, so I could go all out. I made notes on Friday night. Flowers, takeout from her favorite Mediterranean restaurant, a bubble bath, fresh sheets on the bed, breakfast in bed on Saturday, a spa trip, more flowers, dinner reservations at the town's finest restaurant, a full-body massage, and lovemaking time reminiscent of our early marriage days. I grinned with anticipation. As expected, Anne arrived home at 7 a.m. from the zoning committee meeting, exhausted. I'm too tired to cook, she groaned, collapsing onto the couch. Suddenly she caught a whiff of something delightful. What's that amazing smell? Then she spotted the flowers on the coffee table. Where did these come from? I approached her, kneeling beside her with a broad smile. These beautiful flowers are for my beautiful wife, and dinner is already prepared. Amazed, she admired the flowers and suggested moving them to the dining room. While she did that, I plated her meal in the kitchen. By the time she sat down, everything was ready. With a clean towel draped over my arm, I presented her favorite chilled wine. Care for a glass, my lady? Grateful, she nodded, and as we sipped our wine, we began our meal. After a few minutes, she set her fork aside and praised the dinner.
"This is wonderful. You haven't treated me like this in ages. What's the occasion?"
Then her expression shifted.
"Are you feeling guilty about something?"
I anticipated this question. "Yes," I admitted. "I've neglected you for too long. You've been working tirelessly, juggling 2 jobs while I've been absorbed in my own work. I realize now how lucky I am to have you as my wife, and I'm committed to showing you how much you mean to me." She paused, then broke into a smile. "We've both overlooked each other, haven't we?" Gesturing to the table, she asked, "Anything else?" "Of course," I replied eagerly. "After dinner, I'll run you a bubble bath so you can relax. Then I'll tuck you in for a good night's sleep." I grinned. "You'll need it because I have more planned for tomorrow." It had been a while since I'd seen her smile like that. Later, as she settled into bed after her bath, she noticed the new bedding. "Is this new?" she asked, running her fingers over the fabric. "It's the finest cotton with the highest thread count I could find," I proudly replied. "Now, relax and have sweet dreams." She smiled gratefully and closed her eyes as I turned out the light. When I checked on her a couple of hours later, she hadn't stirred. The next morning, she was still asleep when I brought in a tray loaded with eggs Benedict, hash browns, and mimosas. "Don't take too long," I reminded her. "You've got a spa appointment at 10 o'clock. She shook her head in surprise. "You spoil me." "I hope so. You deserve it. Oh, and after the spa, why not check out the mall for something to wear tonight at Il Fiorentino?" She glared at me as I descended the stairs. Dinner was special. Anne had found a stunning new dress, and when I saw it, I knew I was lucky. When the waiter brought the Prosecco, I toasted to the beautiful woman who made me the luckiest man. She raised her glass, eyeing me curiously. "You're not hiding a mistress somewhere, are you, Dave?" I flinched at the suspicion. "Absolutely not, Cookie. I take my vows seriously, and I couldn't be more attracted to anyone than you." "Never," she agreed, clinking her glass with mine. Our dinner was superb, but we skipped dessert to avoid feeling too full. After finishing the second bottle of wine, we giggled as we climbed the stairs hand in hand. In the bedroom, she turned to me, asking, "What's next, my dear husband?" And then we had an amazing night, enjoying ourselves. The next morning, we slept in, skipping breakfast for brunch. Sunday was intentionally left free for a normal day. After brunch, we tackled usual weekend tasks. Anne went to the grocery store while I mowed the lawn. Later, she showed a house to a potential buyer, and I checked email. Everything felt happy and normal, just like our life together. Driving to work Monday morning, I felt upbeat. The project to reconnect with my wife was progressing well. I sensed a renewed closeness with Anne, and I believed she felt it too. I left a cheesy note on our bulletin board expressing my affection. Work went smoothly, and I made sure to leave early to greet Anne. As I heard the garage door open, I eagerly awaited her arrival. But instead of a warm welcome, I was met with a stinging slap across my face. Shocked, I recoiled as my ears rang. "What was that for?" I exclaimed. "You hired a detective agency to spy on me?" Anne's voice shook with fury. "You don't trust me?" Her fists clenched, her face flushed with anger. "You've humiliated me!" She paused, breathless. "Well, what do you have to say?" I stood speechless, realizing my mistake. "But I do trust you, Anne. I know you've been faithful," I pleaded. "Faithful after 2 weeks of surveillance?" Her face twisted in disgust. "Don't ever call me Cookie again." My silence fueled her rage. "You were only nice to me out of guilt," she accused, tears streaming down her face. "I've never been treated so horribly by my own husband." With that, she stormed upstairs, leaving me shattered on the couch, grappling with regret and uncertainty. What could I say or do to make amends? My mind raced in circles, searching for an answer. Flowers or candy won't help now. I feel like no gift can win her back. The cost? What if she finds out how much I paid Masterson? I put ice on my jaw. I deserved it. What if she wants a divorce? I couldn't blame her. Why did I let paranoia control me? She came downstairs, grabbed her purse, and snapped, "I don't want to be near you." "Are you coming back?" I asked. But she left without an answer. Our bedroom seemed normal, but my clothes were scattered in the guest room. I packed my things, resigned to sleeping there. At least she didn't kick me out. I ate leftovers while waiting for her, but she didn't return. Eventually, I went to bed. I woke to her footsteps, but she locked herself in our room, leaving me filled with dread. After a restless night, I rose early and used the guest bathroom for a shower and shave. Once done, I quietly tested the master bedroom door, unsurprisingly finding it still locked. Downstairs, I brewed some coffee, but my lack of appetite led me to skip breakfast. Before leaving for work, I glanced at our bulletin board and grabbing chalk wrote,
I'm sorry, Anne, can we talk?
Though I wanted to say more, I restrained myself. Thankfully, work presented no major issues, as I would have been ineffective dealing with them. My mind was consumed with how to explain my actions without exacerbating the situation.
Honey, I love you, but I had suspicions of your fidelity. Perhaps that's not the best angle. How about now that I've thoroughly reassured myself, I trust you again?
Yeah, that might reassure her. After wrestling with it all day, I resolved to tell her the truth.
Darling, I feared we were growing apart, allowing paranoia to cloud my judgment.
This approach offered the virtue of honesty and, paired with a genuine apology, might offer some solace. Leaving work slightly early, I prepared to throw myself at her mercy upon her return. However, my hopes were dashed when I spotted the bulletin board in the kitchen. My plea had been erased, replaced by a blunt, "Go to hell," not a promising sign. Nevertheless, I prepared a delicious dinner for us, hoping we could talk over the meal. 2 hours later, sitting alone at the table, the folly of my plan became evident. Accepting defeat, I finished my dinner and stored her untouched plate in the fridge. Just as I was wrapping up the late news, she arrived home. As she made her way upstairs, I couldn't resist speaking up.
I was concerned about you, Anne. I had no idea where you were.
She fixed me with a steely gaze.
Why didn't you contact your private investigator and report the incident?
Her voice dripped with sarcasm. With that, she ascended the stairs, the slam of our bedroom door echoing. All I could manage was a groan. That night crystallized the state of our relationship. We existed in a cold war with no room for negotiation. She came and went at will, her schedule a mystery to me. We no longer ventured out or shared experiences. I was convinced divorce was imminent, wary of any interaction with strangers. Yet, to my relief, the divorce papers never arrived. Over time, I discerned a subtle shift in our dynamic, if not a thawing. Her rage toward me gradually gave way to apathy. Conversation resumed, but only regarding practical matters.
Is tomorrow garbage day? Any mail for me?
Yet discussions about our predicament remained off limits, the bedroom door firmly shut. In the quiet of the night, my thoughts cycled through a tumult of emotions, akin to those repetitive gifs online. Initially, I harbored resentment and defensiveness toward her treatment.
How long will she keep this up? I haven't wronged her. It's unfair to shut me out.
But swiftly, remorse flooded in.
This is your fault, David. Imagine her doing the same. How long before you'd forgive?
Then back to remorse. Above all, I felt profound anguish. I longed for my wife, for the closeness we once shared. My aim had been to draw us closer, yet all I achieved was to push us further apart. Memories of the blissful weekend before everything unraveled haunted me, a poignant reminder of what was lost. Those around me started to notice my depression, but their inquiries and concerns only exacerbated it. The last thing I wanted was to discuss my actions, especially with my friends. I dreaded their reaction, knowing they would be outraged by what I had done. Moreover, if news of hiring a detective to spy on Anne surfaced, it could spawn damaging rumors, potentially damaging her political aspirations. If I sabotaged Anne's political future, our relationship would undoubtedly crumble. I felt trapped in an inescapable dilemma. Feeling utterly despondent, I had nobody to confide in. I now understood the anguish of purgatory. One Sunday, seeking solace, I took a stroll in the woods, hoping the fresh air would clear my mind. After walking for an hour, I reached a small clearing and sat on a log seeking respite. The tranquility of nature contrasted sharply with my inner turmoil. I can't go on like this. I still love Anne, but our marriage is over. It's unfair to both of us to continue like this. We're both responsible, but I bear the brunt of it. Our marriage is dead, and I'm the one who eliminated it. Strangely, as I reached this conclusion, a wave of relief washed over me. I took a deep breath, admiring the sky, trees, and the clearing. It's so beautiful here. I wish Anne could see it with me. Instantly, I realized what I had just thought, and the bitter taste of defeat flooded my senses. After a busy Monday at work, I sought out a family law firm that advocated for amicable divorce proceedings in a respectful setting. It resonated with me. If our marriage was beyond salvaging, I wanted to end it with as little pain as possible. I made an appointment for later in the week and just managed to hang up before the phone rang again.
Is this David Davis?
A hesitant voice queried, sounding vaguely familiar.
Yes. Who's calling, please?
This is Maria Elena Alvarez. I'm not sure if you remember me, but we crossed paths at Stranger Brew, and now the girl is in trouble. I recall you, Maria Elena. How can I assist you? I need to discuss something very important with you. All right, I suppose I can do that. What's on your mind? No. This necessitates a face-to-face conversation. Is this some kind of gesture? It doesn't sound like him, but still, I'm not entirely clear. Could you elaborate, please, David? I urgently need to meet with you right away, if possible. I could swing by your office if that suits. That works. I'll see you there. Thank you. What had I gotten myself into? Yet, she had seemed genuine earlier, and her urgency struck a chord. Setting aside my work, I headed towards the cafe. Upon entering, I found her waiting at a table toward the back. As I approached, she rose and shook my hand, then offered me a cup of my favorite coffee. Taking a sip, I pondered how to broach the topic. Opting for casual conversation for now, I inquired, "How's the Masterson Independent treating you?" A grimace clouded her expression. "Not great. I got terminated yesterday." "Fired? What happened?" I queried, but she deflected. "I'll fill you in on that later. First, let me ask about you. How are things with your wife?" I was taken aback. How could she be aware of Anne and me? Then I mentally scolded myself. Of course she knows. She witnessed me entering the agency. Heck, she might have even been part of the team surveilling Anne. In that instant, all my worries flooded back, and I felt the weight of depression settling in. Leaning back in my chair, I shook my head. This isn't going smoothly. Not at all. Somehow, Anne discovered I was tailing her, and she exploded. Surprisingly, amidst the chaos, all my anguish spilled out, and I divulged to this almost stranger the narrative I had kept concealed for so long. She observed me stoically as I recounted my turmoil. When I finally finished, she cocked her head to one side and queried, "When you met with Mr. Masterson, did he show you the surveillance photos?" "Yes, of course. Why? What did they reveal?" I asked, perplexed. "They depicted Anne engaging in routine activities, meeting with clients, attending council meetings, working in her office. Everything appeared normal, completely innocent." She leaned in, her expression strained. "David, yesterday morning at the agency, I needed to make copies of some documents. While at the copy machine, I stumbled upon your file folder." She blushed slightly. "I shouldn't have delved into it, but I remembered your kindness toward me and I couldn't resist. So I peeked inside. I saw the same photos you described, David. However, there were additional images that Masterson must have omitted. David, I came across some photos of your wife with another man. They were lovemaking, engaging in physical activity." "What? That can't be. Masterson assured me otherwise." "But there's more, David. The timestamps on the photos were different." "So this wasn't an isolated incident?" "Your wife is involved in an affair with this man." "I couldn't believe it. There must be some mistake. It couldn't have been Anne. Why would Masterson deceive me?" "I don't know, David, but when he discovered me with your file, he erupted and immediately terminated my employment. If he had nothing to hide, why such a reaction? Do you have copies of the photos? I need to see them myself." "No, I'm sorry. I didn't have a chance to make copies." I scrutinized her carefully. "Are you certain this isn't some attempt to retaliate against Masterson for firing you?" I detected the bitterness in her gaze instantly. "Sure, I'm upset with Masterson, but I would never use you for revenge. You were so supportive, defending me even though we hardly knew each other. I couldn't repay your kindness with such malice." Her eyes welled with tears. Perhaps she's a skilled actress. Yet, I brushed aside the suspicion. She's not deceiving me. Nevertheless, I struggled to grasp the significance of her words. "All right, so who is this other man in the picture?" "I don't know. I didn't recognize him." She reached across the table, gripping my hand. "David, there's much I don't comprehend, but I have a suspicion as to why Masterson misled you. Your wife holds sway in this town. I believe Masterson is blackmailing her." That gave me pause. In our town, there were plenty of individuals eager to exploit the scandal to unseat Anne in the upcoming election. Despite her ambition, she would go to great lengths to avoid such public embarrassment. Instinctively, I touched my jaw where Anne's slap had stung. Had she been deceiving me all along? Had she treated me poorly, then shared a laugh with her lover about it? The more I dwelled on it, the more my anger simmered. Rising abruptly, I stepped outside and proceeded down the sidewalk. Maria Elena hurried after me, clutching my arm. "David, where are you going?" "I'm heading to Masterson's immediately to uncover the truth." "Wait, David, pause and consider. If I'm correct, Masterson will only lie to you to maintain his control over your wife, and he likely has already removed those photos from your file. You won't get anything from him." She sensed my hesitation and pressed on. "And the same goes for confronting Anne. Do you truly believe she'll confess?" She guided me toward a nearby bench. "If you share what I told you, they'll both dismiss me as a disgruntled ex-employee. It'll be my word against theirs." Meeting my gaze earnestly, she asserted, "David, I swear to you, I'm telling the truth. I hope you trust me." I scrutinized her expression, testing my instincts. She's not lying. She's attempting to repay whoever aided her. "I believe you, Maria Elena." Relief and gratitude flickered across her face, but then she turned serious. "There's something else, David. I urgently wanted to meet with you. I learned another crucial detail yesterday. I saw Masterson's schedule. He has a meeting scheduled with your wife in 30 minutes. If you're willing to observe, maybe we can uncover his intentions." "Yes, definitely. Do you know where they're meeting?" "I wrote it down." She handed me a slip of paper with a suburban address scribbled on it. 2232 Magnolia Lane. "Why there?" I muttered, more to myself than to her. "It's in a residential neighborhood." I shrugged, pushing aside the question for later. "Let's go," I said, gesturing toward where my car was parked nearby. Soon we were en route to the address Maria Elena had provided. I remained silent, but inside I was boiling with anger. I had felt so guilty for doubting my wife, yet now it seemed I had good reason all along. What a betrayal. Who was her secret lover? How long had the affair been going on, and what role did Masterson play? I cautioned myself to be patient, to wait until I had concrete evidence of Anne's infidelity. Jumping to conclusions had led me astray before, but it was hard to stay calm. "There he is," Maria Elena exclaimed as I drove past the address without noticing. After looping around, I parked on the street 2 houses down. "Wow, this is a really nice neighborhood. Whose house is this?" I mused aloud. Then as we approached the house, I spotted something I had overlooked, a for sale sign from my wife's real estate agency. Suddenly, it all clicked. "That explains the meeting location. This house is vacant," I informed Maria Elena in a hushed but assertive tone. "The owners have moved out, and she's been trying to sell it for months." Staying concealed behind the large hedge surrounding the property, we made our way toward the driveway. 2 cars were parked there, neither of which I recognized. "You stay here. I'll scout around and see if I can spot them," I whispered. "I'm coming with you," she retorted angrily, and I relented. Together, we cautiously approached the house. Keeping to the shadows of the hedge, we heard noises emanating from the back of the house. As we crept closer, we glimpsed French doors leading into what appeared to be a den. Peering inside, my adrenaline surged. Anne, clad in lingerie I'd never seen before, reclined on the couch conversing with someone hidden from view around the corner. I clenched my jaw. She's getting comfortable. Suddenly, a figure emerged into sight, and I remained silent. Bradley Masterson strolled into the room, wearing nothing but a grin. Later on, we saw them enjoying themselves. I seized Maria Elena's arm and motioned for her to step outside. I had never felt such fury in my life. "That woman!" I seethed once we were out of earshot. "If he's blackmailing her, she doesn't seem bothered in the least." "Should we take photos?" she inquired. After a moment's thought, I grinned. "Absolutely. We'll snap plenty of pictures and maybe involve others." I hastened to Anne's for sale sign, yanked it from the ground, and concealed it behind a hedge where it wouldn't be easily noticed. Then, I retrieved my cell phone and dialed emergency. "I need to report a residential break-in. I spotted 2 individuals attempting to force entry at 2232 Magnolia Lane. They could be burglarizing the property as we speak. If you act quickly, you might catch them before they escape." I hung up without disclosing my identity, and Maria Elena gazed at me bewilderedly. Ignoring her, I contacted my friend at Channel 9. "Hey, Amy, are you still covering those home burglaries? I've got a tip for you. There's been a break-in at 2232 Magnolia Lane. The police are already on the scene. If you hurry, you can beat the competition and capture some great footage." "That's right. 2232 Magnolia Lane. No problem. I owe you one." "What have you done?" my companion questioned, but I brushed off her inquiry. "Let's head back and capture those pictures." Upon returning to the French doors, we spotted another man. Maria Elena tugged my arm urgently. "That's the man from the photos," she whispered. "Do you recognize him?" I nodded furiously. "Oh, I know him. Anne introduced me to him at one of her political gatherings. It's none other than Harold Hartfield, head of the zoning commission in our city." Suddenly, Maria pulled me away from the door and pointed to the end of the driveway where a patrol car had just arrived. We hurried toward them together. "We saw them, officers," I gasped. "They're still inside. If you hurry, you can catch them." The senior officer glanced at his partner. "There are 2 cars in the driveway, and I don't see any signs of forced entry." He then regarded me suspiciously. "Are you sure a crime is underway?" Just then, a Channel 9 news van screeched to a stop outside, and a reporter and cameraman rushed over to us. "What's the scoop? Can we get any action?" The first officer began to speak when we heard it, a piercing female scream that echoed through the air. "Oh my God!" I exclaimed. "He's damaging her!" The 2 officers exchanged a panicked glance. Then Anne screamed again, even louder this time. "Let's go," I urged. The senior officer drew his weapon and raced toward the front door. The younger officer followed closely behind, and together they burst through the entrance and vanished inside. "Start filming," the reporter instructed his partner. Turning away from the house, he spoke rapidly into the camera. "We're outside a residence at 2232 Magnolia Lane, where police are investigating a suspected break-in. We just heard screams coming from inside, prompting police to enter the premises." Before he could finish, the sounds of chaos erupted from within the house. It resembled something out of an old-fashioned movie brawl, except in reality, there were screams and the sound of shattering furniture and glassware. The cameraman zoomed in on the house just as the commissioner emerged from the front door, completely undressed. Following closely behind him was my wife, also dressed in the same manner. "Hold on," she yelled as Harold swung open the door of one of the cars and started the engine. Once she was inside, he shifted into reverse, slamming on the brakes just in time to avoid colliding with a patrol car parked at the end of the driveway. In a panic, Hartfield shifted into drive and accelerated into the yard. He maneuvered the steering wheel, carving deep ruts in the lawn, attempting to plow through the hedge. He almost succeeded, but the thick branches halted the car, lifting the rear axle so high that the tires spun uselessly in the air. The reporter immediately recognized the 2 politicians. He signaled to his cameraman and then rushed toward the immobilized car. "Commissioner Hartfield, Councilwoman Davis, could you please explain to our viewers what you were doing in the house together? And where are your clothes?" The commissioner remained silent, but when the reporter persisted, Harold rolled down the window. As the camera kept rolling, the 2 men inside struggled to shield their nudity with their arms and hands while exchanging angry shouts. Then the cameraman redirected his focus back to the house. Bradley Masterson's stooped, unclothed form came into view, his hands bound together, blood dripping from several wounds. The 2 policemen escorting him towards the exit appeared worse for wear as well. "Who's that?" the reporter inquired, bewildered. "This is Bradley Masterson, head of Masterson Investigations," Maria Elena explained. "He's a private detective." The reporter jotted down the name but remained puzzled. "And who are you?" he queried Maria Elena. "We need to head home, dear," I asserted, taking her hand and guiding her to my car. As we drove away, we witnessed the police dispersing the onlookers who had gathered to watch. In the ensuing days, the story became a sensation in the city. Channel 9 featured the footage in a promotional clip for its nightly news, and the images of the commissioner, councilman, and investigator shielding their modesty were replayed numerous times. The tale was so scandalous that Channel 9's national affiliate picked it up, landing it on the national evening news. Soon, there were few corners of the country where people hadn't glimpsed the spectacle of my wife dashing across the lawn. Predictably, Masterson was swiftly incarcerated for assaulting a police officer. During his transfer to his cell, he made lewd comments about the 2 officers and his intentions upon release. Unamused, the judge overseeing the case denied him bail. Determining the crimes, if any, committed by the commissioner and councilwoman proved more challenging for the police. Breaking and entering was quickly ruled out, and when it emerged that Anne was the real estate agent for 2232 Magnolia Lane, even trespassing charges were dropped. Nonetheless, due to the intense media coverage, they were compelled to lay low. The local newspaper was outraged by the scandal and tasked its staff with uncovering the truth. "Politics make for odd bedfellows in commissioner and councilman scandal," blared the headline the following day. I assumed it revolved around matters of closeness, but I was mistaken. A diligent newspaper journalist conducted some investigation and uncovered evidence of bribery linked to various local real estate ventures. It emerged that a councilman was soliciting bribes from developers, while the commissioner sought favorable zoning permits in exchange for the councilman's physical favors. Apparently, they hadn't covered their tracks well enough because once the story broke, they were swiftly apprehended and charged with official misconduct. Upon returning to my office off Magnolia Lane, my first action was to phone the law firm I had previously contacted and cancel the appointment. "Oh, The courteous woman I spoke to inquired hopefully.
Does that mean you and your wife have reconciled?
It means I'm not interested in an amicable split anymore, I responded icily. I'll hire a fierce lawyer and take her down. It seemed inevitable that I would become embroiled in the situation, at least initially. The police questioned me multiple times, attempting to ascertain if I had been involved in or benefited from my wife's misdeeds. Fortunately, Anne maintained all her finances in a separate account under her name only. When I explained to the lieutenant how I had engaged Masterson to investigate my wife, he offered a sympathetic shake of his head. My friends and colleagues also expressed sympathy, yet none knew quite what to say to me. We all held affection for Anne, and realizing she was a corrupt politician and unfaithful was disheartening. None were sorry that I'd been deceived. Consequently, most of them began to avoid me, a reaction I couldn't fault them for. I retained a formidable attorney to handle the divorce proceedings, although it ultimately proved unnecessary given Anne's public indiscretions and the probability of incarceration. While divorce wasn't contested, my lawyer ensured that Anne received the least favorable portion of the financial settlement. I thought I was finished with her, but surprisingly I found myself in another encounter with my soon-to-be ex-wife. Anne's lawyer reached out to me. She wanted me to testify in Anne's defense. Initially, I chuckled at the idea, but my amusement faded when the lawyer mentioned she'd subpoena me if I refused to cooperate. The prospect of being dragged back into a confrontation with Anne was unappealing, and I contemplated backing out. However, her lawyer proposed interviewing me before the trial, with Anne present. After a moment's consideration, I agreed, on the condition that Anne would answer some questions for me. I felt relieved when she consented. Perhaps now I'd finally get some answers. Upon entering the attorney's conference room, Anne stood there in one of her power suits, a familiar sight from council meetings. I had to admit she still looked impressive. Yet, as I observed her closely, I could see the toll of stress on her face. Mr. Davis, Anne's attorney, began the discussion. I understand your marriage is nearing dissolution under favorable terms. We're not here to discuss that. We aim to demonstrate that before Mrs. Davis strayed under external influences, she was a loving and morally upright partner. We'd like you to testify about your shared life before recent unfortunate events. Driven astray by others' temptations, I thought sarcastically. Well, that's one interpretation. But I kept my composure and addressed the lawyer calmly. When I married my wife, I started, she struck me as the most attractive, engaging woman I'd ever met. She was intelligent, witty, and had a knack for making people feel comfortable around her. The lawyer nodded at Anne, then turned back to me with encouragement. She meticulously noted down each word I uttered. For the first 6 years of our marriage, Anne and I shared the same aspirations and dreams, and I felt we were progressing towards them. The lawyer interjected. You mean the first 8 years, don't you, Mr. Davis? You've been married for 8 years, as I understand? I disregarded her and pressed on. But ever since she joined the city council, my wife has changed. She's become ambitious, manipulative, caring only for her own advancement. She increasingly neglected our marriage as she pursued her own goals. It was her growing indifference and disdain towards me that led me to hire a private investigator.
No, Mr. Davis, that's not what we're aiming for. Please, disregard. Virginia interrupted Anne. I told you he was unlikely to assist me.
Then she glared at me resentfully.
So why are you here today, Dave? What's your agenda?
I crossed my arms and leaned forward on the table. I want 30 minutes alone with you to ask some questions. And will you help me if I comply?
Absolutely not.
She studied me for a moment, then sighed and reclined in her chair.
Fine, I guess I owe you. You've got 30 minutes.
Are you certain? Anne's attorney inquired.
It's fine. He won't injure me.
With that, the lawyer exited the room, closing the door behind her. Anne turned to me.
All right, Dave, what do you want to know?
I had numerous inquiries, but I opted to begin with the fundamental one. Why, Anne? Why did you do it? Instantly, she sat upright, her eyes flashing with anger. This is all your fault, you know. I wouldn't be in this mess if you hadn't hired that detective to spy on me. I was taken aback.
My fault? How can this possibly be my fault? It's you.
Yet she was so furious she didn't even acknowledge my response. Everything was going smoothly until that idiot showed up at my office with those photos of Harold and me.
And you're the one who sicked him on me. I was livid when I found out.
If you weren't involved with Hartfield, I wouldn't have to deal with this, I stated. She smirked. It wasn't a romantic affair, just political maneuvering. Harold was lacking as a lover, both in size and skill. I only engaged him because he could help me secure the zoning changes I needed. I was dumbfounded. Why would you need zoning permits? You're not a property developer. She shook her head as if explaining to a slow learner. I didn't need them personally, but big developers did, and I needed their backing for my mayoral run. It's all part of the political game. So, it was all about political support then. Then why did the police find over $1 million in your undisclosed bank account? She grinned sheepishly. Okay, maybe money played a part too. Then her expression turned stern again. But none of this would have mattered if you hadn't poked your nose where it didn't belong. What about Masterson? What was his angle? He wanted a share of what I and Harold were getting. Hold on, you said Harold's involvement stemmed from your seduction? Her face took on a peculiar look as I continued. Masterson wanted a cut of what Harold received, and after he took it the first time, I realized he was far superior to Harold. Exceptionally superior. So he didn't coerce you into it? She smirked coyly. Only initially. After that, I was more than willing. She noticed my reaction and chuckled. Everyone has their preferences. I just happened to discover mine. I guess you weren't too upset about me hiring Masterson, I remarked dryly. She gave me a lazy grin. No, actually, I owe you for that. Then her grin faded. And everything would have been fine if those nosy neighbors on Magnolia Lane hadn't intervened. If they hadn't called the cops, I wouldn't be in this mess. For the first time that day, I felt some relief. I rose from my seat and smiled at my estranged wife. Actually, it wasn't the neighbors. I made the call to the police, and I tipped off Channel 9. You did all this, you idiot! She jumped up so suddenly she knocked over her chair. Grabbing a law book from the shelf behind her, she hurled it across the table at me. She was about to leap over when her lawyer barged in and restrained her. Calm down, Anne. You can't do this. Excuse me? I can't be a witness to your client's character. Counselor, I uttered as I exited the room. Then I turned back. Enjoy your time in prison. Cookie Masterson ultimately pleaded guilty to assaulting a police officer and testified about a bribery plot, besides serving jail time. Naturally, he lost his license as a private investigator. Hartfield received a lighter sentence as he hadn't directly accepted any bribes. Nonetheless, he lost his job, his reputation, and his marriage, disappearing from town for good. I reckoned he got what he deserved. I deliberately avoided any news about Anne's trial, partly because I didn't care about her fate, and partly to maintain plausible deniability if asked. However, while at Stranger Brew sometime later, I happened to spot a newspaper headline announcing her sentencing. Unable to resist, I read it. As it turned out, Anne was sentenced to 3 to 5 years in state prison and fined $25,000 for soliciting illegal gratuities. I was also pleased to learn she faced federal charges for tax evasion on her secret funds. Seizure of her unlawfully obtained assets didn't spare her from federal prosecution. I rubbed my cheekbone. Exactly what she deserved. Perhaps now I can move on? My thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. Hey there, can you buy a girl a cup of coffee? I smiled at her. I'd be delighted, Maria Elena.